around the world. It's Learn Ubuntu Live, presented by LearnUbuntu.org, with your host, Tom Judge. Okay, here we are with part 2 of building a workstation for the dumpster. You may remember we left off with our motherboard giving us a beep message. And we have to use a combination of two things to figure out what that beep message means. We have to use the scientific process, also known as the process of elimination, and also a little research on the web to locate more information about that motherboard and find out what those specific beep codes meant. We can see our motherboard is running here now, and it started without beeping. We're going to show you the whole thing in a second. Previously, we had 2 short beeps followed by 1 long beep. And by doing some research on the net, we found out that that means there's either the video display is bad or not installed. So we found another PCI Express video card, but now we have a working motherboard. So we had to figure out what those post-beep messages meant, and they're different for different motherboards, so that's the kind of thing you have to do some homework on the internet to figure out. The post-beep messages are going to be different for different motherboards, so you're going to have to look up your specific make and model motherboard and try and locate the beep codes for those on the web. After a little bit of research, we're able to find those for these. I'm showing you here in this graphic what we have. We're going to restart this thing now so you can see. We have no beeps, which is a good thing. Obviously, there's no hard drive installed yet or anything for it to boot on, but now we have a working motherboard. So we had to figure out what those post-beep messages meant, and they're different for different motherboards, so that's the kind of thing you have to do some homework on the internet to figure out. So here's a bird's eye view of our machine, and we're going to start and stop it from scratch, and you'll notice we will not have those annoying beep codes that we had earlier. We also found a better fan that fits on the CPU. Here we are starting up. And here's our screen, which is telling us to reboot because we haven't got a boot device configured in this machine yet. But this is good news, because now we have something we can work with. I'm going to restart this one more time so you can see. The little HP screen will flash for a second. This was having problems with the video display card. This one has an onboard video display. I want to check and make sure that it wasn't disabled in the CMOS, because that would be causing the error. Somebody may have disabled it and used an external card previously. Remember, this is all as we find it, so you never know what condition a motherboard or anything is going to be in when you pick it out of the dumpster. You have to be prepared for anything. Now here's where the brake key comes in handy, because what we want to do is we want to catch that screen when it first comes up. You only have a second to do it. Come on. See, F10 is set up. F12 is how we can select our boots. F11 is system recovery, and F9 is diagnostic. Let's hit F10 and see what our settings are in our CMOS. Let's hit F10. Okay, here we see the CMOS screen, and we got to this by following the instructions on the initial boot up screen, which said to press F10 for setup. And here's what the CMOS BIOS settings looks like. And we're just looking through this now. A couple of important things we'll point out. As you notice, since we have not got a hard drive installed, notice all 4 drives say none. There's no DVD, no CD, no hard drive, no nothing. If you look down at the bottom where our memory area is, I'm going to scroll down to that. Won't let us access that because it's a read-only section. But you notice it says installed memory 4096, which is 4096 megabytes, which is 4 gigabytes, and that's because we have basically two 2 gig memory chips installed. It shows us the BIOS version, the core version, the model number of the motherboard and or BIOS, the product number, the build ID, and that's just the basic screen. Our system time, which appears to be off by an hour. We probably have the wrong time zone set. We can easily change that. It's an hour earlier. If you carefully read the screen in your CMOS setup, there are instructions that tell you what to do. And it is not the same for every PC. That's the bad news. But the good news is that it's similar for most PCs within reason. And if you look on the right side of the screen and along the bottom, it tells you keys to press and what those keys do. And it's also context sensitive. As I go around here, notice that it says configure the system time on the right, and here it says configure the system date. So this is context sensitive. And now this is the wrong hour. It's an hour late. So I'm going to hit the minus key and make that 7 a.m. rather than 8 a.m. It appears that the date is correct, so we'll leave that, and the year is correct. The language we want, floppy is not installed. On most of the newer motherboards, we don't have to do anything except plug in a drive and let the BIOS of the motherboard find that drive. On older systems, I'm talking older, most of these ones are long gone, you would have to set the heads and sectors and tell the BIOS the size of the hard drive. In this case, we shouldn't have to do that. We go to advanced, here's where we have to use a little caution. Now, setup warning. We're getting a warning which tells us that if we goof this up, we could destroy the machine. However, at the very bottom of the screen, we see setup defaults, which will set everything back to a good known factory default setting. And many times when I have a motherboard that I don't know where it's been or what it's been set at, I will do that. I will select F5, load the defaults, click OK, and when I'm done, I will save it. We go over here, exit, see it says save, changes, and exit. So let's do that. Okay, we're going to come right back here though, but we also have a load setup defaults here too, by the way. We can also discard any changes we made from the screen, as you see on the menu there. So we'll click OK. Here we see our splash screen. Now, obviously, if you don't have an HP, if you have a Dell or some other brand, it's going to look quite different. Now, unfortunately, this screen usually goes by so quick, it's just a flash, a second or two, that you don't get to see it. That's why God invented the pause key. If you look on your keyboard, normally in the upper right-hand corner, and we're showing you this illustration here, you will have a key labeled pause break. As you boot the machine, you want to tap that key, and it should pause and halt the system temporarily. Pressing any other key will unpause and let it continue. Now, since this screen comes up right away, you have to watch, and as soon as you see that screen appear, you hit that pause key, and it will hold it for you. And here we see our screen, our initial BIOS screen, our initial boot up screen, and as you can see, we have some information there that's very useful for troubleshooting. It shows us that if we press the F10 key, it will let us enter setup. An escape key will allow us into the boot menu, where we can select what our boot media will be, aka a floppy disk, a DVD CD, a specific hard drive, and some even support the over-the-network boot P protocol. F11 is a system recovery, and F9 is diagnostics. Now, the F11 system recovery, that will normally point to a partition on the hard drive that comes as an OEM creation. If we're putting something together out of the dumpster, that system recovery is probably not going to do very much for us. we want to consult a specific manual for each manufacturer to see exactly what that system recovery option will do for us. But generally, it points to a little hidden partition on the disk that has some utilities that a technician can use to help you over the phone to get a machine working again. And F9 is diagnostics. Never hurts to look at that. Let's take a quick peek at the diagnostics since we're here. Now again, it's pause, but any key we hit is going to let us continue. So I hit the F9 key. The first time it unlocked the pause. The second time it should have put us into a diagnostic mode. Let's see if we get that screen. There we go. Now the CPU passed. If you look at this screen, it shows you the CPU. And it shows us that it's also testing the memory. Again, not every PC is going to have this, but it never hurts to look at what you got, especially since this thing came out of the dumpster. We have no idea what condition it's in. It's about 73% done with the memory check right now. I'm curious to see what it does after this and what it tells us, because the video card, the onboard video card, is still somewhat of a mystery on this particular motherboard. If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. There are other options for that, specifically putting an external video card in. Now again, you may not have the specific model PC. Yours may not be an HP, it may be a Dell. Your CMOS may look a little bit different, but a little common sense could prevail here. And hopefully some of the skills you're learning in this video you'll be able to interpolate to your specific model of PC. And again, always refer to the manual for your specific model PC. So here we are back to our screen, our testing screen, and the memory's almost done. Of course, now it's going to sit there and say, well, warning, there's no hard drive. That's right. And we shouldn't be surprised about that because we do not have a hard drive installed. Let's press any key to continue, as it says. We'll skip that part of the test. And that's the only test it appears they're going to give us. As you see on our screen, the hard drive test looks like it failed. Of course, that's because there's no hard drive. And I'm curious if there are more tests that would continue on this motherboard if we had a hard drive installed. So we're going to try something. We're going to just, I like to call this hanging in the breeze. We're going to show you that. We just connect some devices to this computer without actually completely bolting them in. And we have an 80 gig hard drive. This is a SATA. You can see the SATA connections here for the power and the SATA data cable. And we also have a SATA DVD CD. So what we're going to do is we want to connect those and see how they appear in the CMOS and just see what our testing goes to, because we're still curious to see if anything turns up and gives us a clue as to what's going on with the video on this. We have some ideas, but I'm going to share them a little later. Let's take this one step at a time here. So let's go to our blimp cam so we can see what we're doing here. And if you look down on the motherboard, and if we can see that, let's take our other cam here. I call this my spy cam because I can move this in manually anywhere I want. I'm about the size of a cigar. So let's take this and see if we can get a shot off of this puppy. Here are two SATA connectors on the board, and I believe that these are also two SATA connectors. So we have some onboard SATA connectors. So let's see if we can connect those using a SATA cable to our hard drive. We're going to try and hook up our hard drives. Now, I want to just point this out. If you happen to have a hard drive like this, this uses the IDE connector, not the SATA connector, which is different. Where'd our little SATA drive go? These things tend to grow legs and walk away on me here in this mess I have. Oh, here we go. Here is again, a SATA hard drive. Note these connectors. Here is an IDE hard drive. Note those connectors. So we have to note the difference. Same thing on the CD DVD ROM. This one is a newer one and happens to have the SATA SATA connector. And I just had a legacy one here. Here we go. Here's an older CD or DVD, and this one you can see has the IDE connector. Now, it's very obvious the difference. I'm going to show you the cables. Here's a SATA cable. As you can see, they're very small, and they're keyed, so they can only go in one way, and these will connect to the drive like so when you put them in. On the other hand, if you're using the IDE connector, which in this case is this long connector, it's 37 pins, it holds a ribbon cable. Let me yank a ribbon cable out of the mothballs here. Here's an IDE cable. As you can see, you'd have to try really hard to mix up these two cable types. Now this IDE connector, and very often they're keyed. If you notice, I don't know if you can see, there's a pin blocked in this one. Now if you look at the back of the drive, very often, right in the middle there's a pin that's missing. There's also a little key in that connector, so it really is only supposed to go in one way. Now, sometimes the cables have an extra little bump of a key in here, sometimes they don't, but the more important thing is that pin that's blocked has to go mate where there's a pin missing on this. So again, it's hard to put them on wrong. If it feels like you're forcing it stop, it means you have it going on wrong. Here's a cable now connected to the IDE drive, and again, as you can see, it's quite different than SATA. There are also little jumpers on the IDE drive, and you have to consult each individual drive. They call it master and slave, or primary and secondary. Generally, it's master and slave on each IDE port. So each port can support two devices, a master and a slave, and the jumpers have to be set correctly. There's also a CS or a cable set, which you can sometimes use to choose which drive is which. So it's important to identify which type of drive you have to work with. And again, we're pulling stuff out of the dumpster. You may have a SATA, you may have an IDE. We work with what we have at the time. The power connectors also are very different on these two drives. I'm going to show you the difference in those now as well. Here's our bird's eye view of our chassis. And if you look, this right here, this is a newer SATA connector, and you can see that that has a little key in it, and that is quite different than this Molex looking 4-pin connector here, which is for the older types of hard drives. So again, it'd be almost impossible to force the right connector on the wrong drive, okay? So again, forcing is no. It'll fit nice and easily and gently if it's the right one. So again, we never want to force anything, okay? The right connector should fit without any kind of a struggle. Let's just take a minute and look at a motherboard so we're familiar with all these motherboard connectors as we progress through the rest of this video. Here's a typical motherboard, and this is not the one that's in this machine. This is the one that's out of a machine, and we have it so we can take a look at it. Here is the CMOS battery. This is what keeps the settings on the motherboard the same as you power off and unplug the machine. Next to that, this is the graphics, the onboard graphics processor. You can usually tell that by the heatsink. Okay. Now next to that, I'm going to move this slightly. See if I can move it the right way here. Here we go. This one, here is our CPU socket. Now this is a newer style CPU socket. I wanted to open this so I could show you this and give you a warning about this. Now if you look closely at this one, there's very small pins in here, and they tend to get disturbed and rendered useless very easily. So I strongly suggest, I'm pointing to them but I'm not touching them. I strongly suggest you do not touch them. I don't know if you can see, as I angle it, you can see that down here there's something wrong. This has been buggered up, for lack of a better term. Okay, and in fact, when you get a new motherboard from Intel or wherever they come from, I'm going to show you something that comes with most new motherboards. When you get a new motherboard, it will generally come with something like this little piece of protective plastic. Now this may not be exactly the right one for this one. You have to have the right one for your socket, okay? There are some differences. But generally it comes with this little piece of protective plastic on there, and you can't send one back to Intel without that. And if you happen to goof up and bugger up these pins like these are here, you just voided the warranty on that motherboard. So if you buy a new motherboard, don't mess with that. Be very careful there with those pins. If you mess them up, the socket won't mate properly with the CPU, and you'll be out of business before you start. As my wonderful second grade teacher used to say, Sister Mary Aropoulos, if you could pronounce that name, you were doing good, and you got a B just for doing that. She used to say, a word to the wise is sufficient, meaning you've been warned. Don't mess with that. Now, back to our motherboard. This one happens to have two memory slots here. Here's our power supply connection, and additionally you may see another power supply connection over here for additional power for the motherboard. This is mainly for the CPU, I believe. Newer CPUs use that. Here is a fan connection. Notice it says CPU fan because that monitors the fan speed. We don't want to mess that up. Now the slots, I wish I could say that they all stuck to the same color code. This is a PCI 16. Now PCI, here's a PCI slot, standard PCI slot. These two are standard PCI slots. And they're white, which is nice, so they're easy to identify. I wish I could say they stuck to the same color code, but they don't. Because on this motherboard, we have a PCI Express. This is a ×1 or ×2 PCI Express. Oh, it says right down there, PCI EX1. This is a PCI EX16, meaning there are 16 channels of serial data for that card that goes in there. Generally, you only get one of these, and it's for your video graphics card, if you're using an external video graphics card in the motherboard. This would be for a network card or an audio card or a, as we saw earlier in the previous video for this, a USB or FireWire card could plug into here. These are your standard PCI. Here we have a floppy connector. A lot of times you don't even see those on motherboards anymore. And over here on the edge, this is an IDE connector. So this motherboard has one IDE connector. Some of the older motherboards will have two for 2 channels of IDE, but this one also has 2 SATA, serial ATA disk connectors. Here is a sound connector, this one right here, for hooking the audio from your CD, DVD up. And the rest of these, this is a USB connector, 1 and 2. Each USB connector has a plus and minus voltage as well as a plus and minus data. Send and receive data. And this here says panel. This is the panel connector, which connects to your on-off switch, your power LED, your HDD LED, etc. Before we close out this section, we did want to mention the motherboards we're showing you use the PCI Express 16 video cards, which is what you find on most newer motherboards. You may, however, have a slightly older motherboard, and you may have what's known as an AGP slot for Advanced Graphics Processor. Here is a board with a PCI Express connector, and here is the AGP connector. As you can see, the slots are different, the pins are different, they're really quite different. This is a close-up of the AGP connector. On the motherboards, usually I've found the AGB connector tends to be brown in color, but that's not a cast in stone rule. Here you see the image that I'm showing you in the graphic on this screen here. I'm showing you an AGP connector on a motherboard. So it's possible that you may have a different type of card. You may even have an older machine that just uses a PCI, a standard PCI slot for the video card. We showed you what those PCI slots look like earlier. Remember, PCI and PCI Express are two totally different animals. Don't get them confused. You'll see smoke come out of something if you do, I guarantee it. All right? Third installment of this series will be installing the hard drive and the DVD drive into our built-from dumpster chassis, and we'll also be installing the free Ubuntu 12.04 desktop operating system. So be sure to tune in for that, coming up soon. Portions of this program were pre-recorded.